Okay, thanks for everybody for sticking around for this presentation. And I'll probably take less. Every time I say this, it never happens, but I'll try to take less time than than is allotted here, not more, so that we can kind of get on with things. So I'm wearing a couple of different hats, as I mentioned this morning. The hat of Water Environment Federation is the hat I'm wearing right now. I'm the Director of Stormwater Programs. Just a little, and I'm not trying to give you an infomercial here, but I'm just trying to give you some context where WEF comes in. WEF's been around for 100 years, literally, focused on water quality issues only, located in the DC area, and has historically focused on, since the biggest water quality issue of the 20th century, when they were founded early 20th century, was on wastewater. Municipal wastewater was a big, that's the center of their universe. They got 35,000 members across the globe, and practitioners of all kinds, both scientists, engineers, lawyers, policymakers, anybody who has any kind of touch point with water quality issues. And they, about 5-6 years ago, actually closer to 7 years ago now, they said, we need to get more onto the stormwater side of things, so I was hired to help them set up a stormwater program, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Did it full-time for a while, and now I do it part-time as a consultant. So that's where I come in. I help to, they set up something called the Stormwater Institute, and I'll talk about that in a second as well. But that's the context of which I'm speaking today. And there's a program or initiative that we have that's called the Stormwater Testing and Evaluation for Products and Practices program. That's what I'll be covering today. I'd love to get feedback from folks to see if there's any questions about clarity on this program or this initiative, whether you guys see a need for this in Hawaii or any other state that you guys are involved in as well. So what I'll be talking about, again, I'll give you a little bit of context on the Stormwater Institute. I've already done a little of that. I'll be talking about what STEP, 2 Ps, is about, and then talk about the relevance to DOTs. And what I don't have at the end here is I'd love to have, again, feedback. I'd love to have some questions, Richard, either from you and or from others, on just to provide some clarity on what this program is about, what we're trying to do, and how to make it more relevant and credible overall. Again, this is not, this whole talk is not about the Stormwater Institute, but I do want to give some context here. If you want any more information on the Stormwater Institute, you can go to stormwaterinstitute.org. But it's basically, WEF is a $25–30 million organization, revenue organization every year. So they're a big organization for a nonprofit. They're mostly known for WEF Tech. I don't know if anyone's been to WEF Tech before. It's a bit of okay, not many folks. WEF Tech is the largest annual water event in the world. We get to be between 20 and 25,000 folks that attend that. It goes back and forth between Chicago and New Orleans. It varies a little bit, but we try to stay in the middle of the continental U.S. That's what we're known for the most part. But we decided we need to, there's a lot of activities going on in a lot of different areas for water quality, wastewater, industrial, effluent, and now stormwater and watershed management. And what we wanted to do is focus that into one entity. So we created the Stormwater Institute, and that's what this is about. We've got a kind of a guiding document or a founding document called Rainfall to Results. You can get a PDF of that if you go to this website. It lays out 6 different areas that we focus on, and these are these 6 different areas that came up. We did a session with a lot of thought leaders in the sector a couple years ago, and these are the areas we said we should try to, it's because WEF is a educational and information organization, so our job is to provide technical resources to the sector. And members of WEF are practitioners, they're individuals, they're not organizations. This is not an organization of organizations. So these are people. So what we want to do is find out what are the areas where folks need technical resources. So these are the kind of the different pie pieces we came up with. And for the STEP program, the area that we're focusing on here is the kind of bottom right-hand corner, supporting innovation and best practices. And that's what we wanted to, that's the box we check in terms of trying to meet these different areas of success. So I'm going to give you an overview of what that is. I just want to give you, again, a context of where, why WEF is involved with this. There's a lot of stormwater organizations out there, a lot of water quality organizations out there, I wanted to let you know how we arrived at being, involved with this effort. So, what is the nature of the problem? Why did we do this? Well, in a kind of a big picture reason, or big picture view, we know that the current practice of if you have a product, you can think about this as practices too. So I'm gonna first talk about proprietary products. I know that there's a number of vendors around here, and vendors are really important to the sector. So, but we're going to start there, but we're not going to end there. But we're going to start there. So if you have a product that has a new innovation, or you just create a new innovative practice in and of itself, trying to get that product out to a market is really challenging. And that's, it's hard to see this cartoon in the bottom right-hand corner, but I'll read it to you. It's not supposed to be an eye test. The guy on the left is talking to the guy on the right, and he says, "This really is an innovative approach, but I'm sorry, we can't consider it. It's never been done before." And this is kind of, to me, I was like, yeah, that's right. That's exactly the way it is. It's innovative, so therefore we can't do it. We want to get beyond that, right? And that's what we're trying to talk about here. So that's the focus here. If we want to drive innovation, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the starting point here, especially on the innovation side. So to get into more detail about the nature of the problem, it depends on, it's kind of like the story about the elephant, and you think the elephant is a different thing if you close your eyes and you touch different parts of the elephant, you think it's a different thing. Same thing here. If you're a manufacturer, again, I have a new great widget. It's going to save the world. It's going to be the greatest thing ever, but I can't get it out to the market. Maybe I can go to one municipality or one state or whatever it is, spend tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, wait several years. I get on the approved product list, and then I can use it in sometimes a limited number of applications. That's a barrier to innovation, and that's a barrier to for the market overall. So that's one aspect. On the consumer side, you can say, a lot of people are coming at me with a lot of different information. I don't have context for this information. Is this snake oil? Is it real? I don't know. I don't have a consumer reports type of clearinghouse that will help me make better decisions. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do what I did before. I'm not going to innovate because that's the safer bet. And that limits innovation as well. And if I'm a regulator, if I have regulated entities that I oversee, then the bottom line is they may be underperforming. They're not innovating the way that they could. So all of this ties into that. Ultimately, this impacts water quality. Really, at the end of the day, that's what we care about. As no matter where you come from, that's the case. To get into a little bit more detail on the aspect of, from the manufacturer's perspective, and I'll talk about how this kind of came to be, and a lot of it came from the sector, the industry sector, I should say, the manufacturers themselves. And we're not here to be, I don't know what the right word is, but not to be a puppet for the industry, but to bring this forward in the sector on behalf of the industry, because it can help water quality overall. But again, we've heard from the manufacturers that we've got all these different programs across the country. If you want to go use your new product somewhere, one city or one state, you have to go to each city, each state, and that's costly. Each one can take, again, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Could take several years to recoup that investment overall, and that's just for one specific product. So we have this patchwork of different types of efforts that you have to go through. It's piecemeal. It's not efficient. It's time intensive. So for all of these reasons, this is a problem. Again, from the consumer side, if I don't have that consumer reports type of third-party objective, standardized apples to apples kind of testing entity and evaluating entity, what am I getting? I have no idea. And if that information is available, I don't have a centralized database. How do I get that information? I don't know of that. Something that's close to it is the International Stormwater BMP database, which is a good tool, but that's a different application. That's more research-oriented. It doesn't really include protocols. It doesn't give the context. But that's the closest thing that I can think about for a centralized knowledge base for this. On the regulatory side, again, we're moving from an era of technology-based permits to performance-based. This is a major driver, that we're investing, and I'm in the Chesapeake Bay watershed area. There are counties and cities that are investing hundreds of millions of dollars over the next 10, 20 years. They want to make sure that what they're putting in the ground is actually going to work, how it's going to work, so they can look not only how it's going to work today, but how it's going to work in 20 years from now. Because if they're under a TMDL, if they're not getting it done, then it's going to come back around one way or the other. So they can try to say, well, this is supposed to get X percentage removal. Okay, it's supposed to. Well, the only person that's holding the permit is that entity. At the end of the day, the buck stops there. So if what they're using isn't getting the job done, and especially in the context of a TMDL, it's going to come back around to them. So there is this, from the consumer side, when I say consumer, that could be a developer, could be a public entity as well. There's also this fear of third-party lawsuits that are kind of associated with the TMDLs. And again, it's all based upon unverified technology. I don't really know what's out there. So that's just kind of the setup for the motivation of why we got into this, what the problem is. And hopefully that's clear. And again, if there's any questions, anytime, I won't be thrown off if there's anyone who wants to ask a clarifying question anytime throughout this presentation. So what happened was back in 2012 at WEFTEC, again, this 20,000 plus event, you don't usually have ad hoc meetings. And if you do, they're not very successful because everyone's overscheduled to the hilt. There's just a million things that go on. For those who've been there, it doesn't sound like many have. It's like 3 or 4 days of just event after event after event. So usually when you try to have some kind of ad hoc meeting, it doesn't really succeed. We actually had one, and it did succeed. We had about my view of success is a lot more than people showed up than I thought. It should be like 30 to 50 people showed up to this meeting that was just scheduled, basically one day prior, and it was focusing on this issue. And we heard from not just the industry folks. Again, we heard from a lot of manufacturers. This is a problem. But we also heard from EPA. EPA is a big supporter. They had a program called ETV, Environmental Technology Verification, I think is what the ETV stood for. And that has gone away. It was around for about 16 years and it got defunded. So they were saying, well, somebody needs to come in behind us, hopefully, and kind of fill this void. And there were some products on the stormwater side that were tested and verified through this program. Not a ton, but there were some. And they were starting to get some momentum, and then the plug was pulled for them. So they felt like, wow, things are just starting to get going and moving forward, and now we're going away. So we saw an open niche, an open need for something like this. Again, this is not something we sought out. We saw it after, but it's something that kind of came to us and said, hey, this is an issue. And so we said, all right, in 2012 we're gonna investigate this. So that's the first thing we said. We'll form this initiative called STEP, and we'll check it out. We'll see if it's a real thing. We'll kick the tires. So, and before I get going too far, this is kind of a landscape of the existing and past testing programs in the continental U.S. so far, and you can see that there's been a lot of different efforts over the years. I don't know if this is on. Let's see if it is. Oh yeah, there we go. So you can see a lot in the Northeast, of course. A lot on the coasts makes sense, right? Because that's what a lot of urbanized areas are. Makes a lot of sense. And you can see that there's these different symbols up here. It's hard to see. The triangle up here is NJCAT, New Jersey Corporation for Advanced Technology. They have their own lab testing protocol. You can see how that's accepted in many places, especially in the East Coast. TAPE, which is the Washington Technology Assessment Protocol for Ecology. Testing Assessment Protocol for Ecology. That's the Washington program, and you can see that's that kind of magenta square, and you can see where that's accepted in many places as well. Other places, there's something called TARP, which I really can't remember what it stands for, but it's kind of defunct. But it was supposed to be a regional protocol that was born and then has now basically died, but it took a lot of its information from NJCAT. And then Caltrans and others, kind of this is the other group. They're only accepted in a handful of places. So primarily what you see is the New Jersey and the Washington programs. The Washington program is a field-based testing program. New Jersey is a lab-based technology program. But a lot of these have gone by the wayside. In fact, the Washington program was started, then it kind of died, and they had to revive it with some more money. Funding and having a sustainable financing and funding source for these programs has been one of the biggest challenges. So you might say, wow, this is a good idea. Why didn't somebody else do it? Well, people have tried. It's not because it's not a good idea. It's because that it's really hard to keep funded. And that's the thing we see in stormwater in general, right? So that's our challenge, I think, to us as we move forward. But anyway, I want to give you a history of how we came up to be where we are today, and then status, and then I'd love to hear from you guys. So the first thing we did was we did a white paper because we didn't know that much about it, frankly. So we said, what is this feasible? Is this needed? What's this thing about? Because this was a new thing for us. So we put together this 24-page document. It's freely available on a website. I'll show you hopefully towards the end. I think I have a link available. And we had a free webcast that went over this as well. And we had close to over 750 people register for that. Showed us, again, wow, there must be a lot of interest in something like this. So maybe we've hit upon something that is needed at this time. So, and the results of the white paper were, yes, it is feasible, it is needed, but we didn't get into the how do you do that? And that's what the next report we did, which was finished in 2016. We got about $125,000 from EPA, has supported us throughout this program, or this effort. And this is more of a roadmap. And again, this is freely available from it used to be ENRF, now is WRF, the Water Research Foundation. But you can see what we covered. Again, we looked at both the Washington and the New Jersey programs as places to start. There's a lot more detail that's in here. This is a long, well-referenced report. And it provides that pathway as we move forward. How is this national program, and it could be international program, how would we roll this out? What would it look like? How much would it cost, and how can we keep it funded? Those are the questions. And these are some of the takeaways from. There's a lot more to it than this, but I'll just kind of go through this list because these are the highlights. The first thing, again, I mentioned that the Washington TAPE program, the New Jersey NJCAT program, those are the most ubiquitous, ubiquitously accepted testing programs and evaluation programs across the country. So we said, let's, instead of creating the wheel ourselves, let's leverage those that have been gone before us, are successful, they're still functioning. One's lab, one's field, so they can complement each other well. We also said we should focus on testing and verification. We shouldn't focus on certification. Certification really should be left to the states. The regulatory bodies should be the ones to certify, or the localities. They should be the ones to certify. But we can verify that the technology works the way that it's stated to work, or we can at least do testing in a standardized way to verify that performance. So that's what this program should be focusing on. Recruitment, we need to get a critical mass of states on board. I say that because if there's anybody in here who has any connection to anyone at DOH or other places where I can get some support, I'd love to hear from somebody here, because we're going through this process right now, state to state to state, to get letters of support. And we have several already, but we need to get as many as we can. So if there's any thoughts on that, I'd love to hear from you guys on that and what needs to happen to get some letters of support from this part of the world. I mentioned early on that we're focusing on proprietary products first, because that's kind of where this problem, I'll say, is arising first. But we also see that there's a lack of equity between testing and verification for proprietary products, and public domain practices. You can build a pond and we assume it works a certain way, or we have a bioretention facility, we assume it works a certain way. We don't verify that. We don't require the same testing of that public domain practice as we do a proprietary product. And from the industry's point of view, they say this is a lack of equity, and I think they've got a point. And the point is not to drag down the industry, but it's actually to raise the bar for what we're putting in the ground, regardless whether it's public domain or private proprietary. And we're starting to see that happen. Actually, the Washington TAPE program, this is already starting to happen. There's a lot more testing being done for these public domain practices. So we want to emulate that at a national level and bring that to a higher level. We have a cafe plan approach. So this isn't a food program. What we're saying is that we recognize that states are different, their needs are different, their regulations are different, we're not trying to build something and jam it down people's throats. What we're saying is, here are some options. Here's a program that you can take, and you can take portions of it, and it'll be there should be more credibility than what we have right now on the performance of things that go through these programs. So you can start with the lab program, for instance. That's kind of a lower bar. It's the easier thing to do. Or if you want to have a lab and field, then you can do that, or you can have just a field option. We can get into details, but that's the bottom line, is that this is intended to be flexible, to respect the flexibility needed by states and by localities. And we also know that if we wanted to make this perfect, it would probably never happen. So we don't want to have the perfect be the enemy of the good. So we want to get this going, and because we've been working on this for a while. We want to get this going, and we know that it's going to improve over time. So there's going to be continual improvement, continual enhancement. That's the idea, at least. So again, the other things that came out of this were the potential pathway forward. Again, this is kind of the breadcrumbs to allow us to understand how we go from here to there. So we developed a business plan, a basic business plan. We need to enhance that. We know that there's kind of a 3-period phasing that needs to happen. There's initial launch. We need this kind of transitional period, and then hopefully it will be sustainable at that point. Finding funding sources for all 3 of these is really difficult, and that's what we're going through right now. Again, I'd love to hear from folks here if you've gone through something similar to try to set up a program like this. And also, there was a suggestion that we don't go it alone. The Water Environment Federation is a big organization, but we can only do so much. And also, there are different skills and different interests that are kind of associated with this type of approach or this type of program. So we said, we should work with other organizations. So that's what we've been focusing on, leveraging those other groups. So currently what we've done is we've put together what's called a work team. Same thing as a work group. That's part of our Stormwater Institute. If you're an and I should mention for our Stormwater Institute, members of our institute are not individuals, and the members of the institute are organizations. So it's a company. We've got companies, we've got consultants, we've got manufacturers, we've got universities, we've got public entities as well. Those are, so it's kind of it's a group of groups. I'll say that. So if you are a member of the institute, through that, you can be part of any work team. So those who've chosen to want to be part of this are part of it. We've also brought in others outside of the Stormwater Institute to make sure that we've got the right skill set. So we put together a work team of about 20, 25 people. I've got a roster. It's available online. We try to be as transparent as possible. So if there's any questions on who's involved, we will provide that. And we do have this consortium group that we mentioned, and I'll talk about that. But the point is to try to, again, share the risk, share the burden, and then leverage the respective strengths. So this is the consortium group that we have right now. We have kind of in the middle is the STEP program or initiative. It still really isn't a thing yet. It's more of a concept at this point. But we've got WEF, our Stormwater Institute here. We've got the Research Foundation, Water Research Foundation. It used to be WENRF, Water Environment and Research Foundation. It's now the Water Research Foundation. We have ITRC, which is a subset of ECOS, which is the Environmental Council of the States. This is the state regulatory programs. ITRC has done a great job on the kind of the hazardous waste, brownfield side of things. Thank you. Yep, thank you. And now they see this as that program. Not that those issues are gone, but that was a bigger issue. As many of you know, probably bigger issue in the 80s, 90s. Now it's kind of stabilized, I'll say, or plateaued. They see stormwater as another big thing that the states are dealing with. So ITRC is kind of that state regulatory group. This is the Washington Department of Ecology, the Washington Stormwater Center, and the TAPE program, again, the Technology Assessment Protocol Ecology, TAPE program. And then there's the New Jersey DEP and CAT, which is the Corporation for Advanced Technology. So that's the groups we're all, and ASTM, which is a very important group. I'm sure folks who know who ASTM is. So, and there are other groups that are associated with this. These are affiliate groups. These are not members of that kind of consortium hub. We've got a lot of other groups that have joined on because they have an interest in this. So we've got regional groups such as the Great Lakes Stormwater Collaborative. We've got City of Indianapolis, which is kind of a leader in that in the Midwest in this area. We're actually working with a group, another STEP group actually with one P that doesn't cause any confusion, but they're out of Canada. And we're also working with the Chesapeake Bay group as well. So we're trying to work with regional groups to try to bring in large chunks of states together. Oregon's got their own testing center, the University of New Hampshire has their own testing center. We're talking to more of those, and we have other industry and NGO groups, ASTE, of course, the home builders we're working with, and of course EPA has been involved in this and supportive all along too. So just, I'm not going to go through all the bullet points here, but just in general, WEF, we're still kind of leading this effort, this initiative. We're bringing everything together. We're facilitating all the events and the meetings and whatnot, and we're trying to do things like this to provide sector and promotional support. Me giving talks, things like this. So that's the role we're playing with the Water Research Foundation. Again, they've started this international BMP database. They want to leverage that, maybe add on a module that would be specifically related to the STEP program. So they're looking at that. They also have a program called LIFT, which is Leaders in Innovation Forum for Technology, which it's like a testing bed for new technologies. If I have a technology and I want to get it tested somewhere, they kind of marry up those who can test with those who want to test. So that's something that they're bringing together. So they're the researchers, and that's what they're trying to leverage. ASTM is helping us standardize. So we're developing standards right now, and if anyone is interested in getting involved with this, there's going to actually be a meeting on December 4th and 5th, which you can attend. It's in DC, but you can engage remotely. Well, 8 in the morning is tough here, obviously. But anyway, there's other ways to engage as well. But ASTM, if we can standardize these protocols in ASTM, that makes it a lot easier for others to get engaged and to adopt. So we're taking the New Jersey and the Washington programs. We're going through this right now to standardize these. So you can just say, I'm going to use ASTM number ... That makes it a lot easier and a lot more nationally recognized. So that's the role they're playing. ITRC, as I mentioned before, they're working with us to develop, basically taking all this information, technical information, make it what they call desktop ready, so that state regulators understand what the hell they're looking at, because oftentimes they may not get that information. That's what ITRC does well, and they're helping us engage with the states. I mentioned before that Washington State and New Jersey are working with us. Basically, they're going to help us borrow their programs while we set up theirs. They're going to continue theirs, and we're going to work in parallel until they feel comfortable enough to focus on ours. So that's the layout of all the consortium partners you can see here. And again, I can provide this in this presentation to whoever wants. Just the last thing that we've got a consortium group. Again, we're moving together. We're developing MOUs. We need to get a critical mass of states. I'd love to get Hawaii on board. Let me know how we can do that. We're developing these standards right now. We have an initial business plan. We'd love to bounce that out, folks, in this part of the world, and we're looking for some kind of funding to get this thing going, which is always the toughest thing to do. So how is it relevant to DOT? Well, I'll just say that the approved product lists are often kept by DOTs. That's what you see across the country, starting with ENS. This is post-construction right now, but we might go to ENS if there's interest in doing so. Maintaining these lists and dealing with having resources to meet with vendors and whatnot, I think that we hear that's a burden for states. So we're trying to reduce that burden, spread that burden out across the states so that you're not having to be inundated with that. Also from industry, it gives a vehicle to get into some seen as credible by the states. We do see that there's continued growth in these products, so that these burdens are going to increase over time. And we also know that there's performance-based programs are happening. So we need to really know how these technologies actually work, not how they kind of work. So that's what I have. I didn't leave much time, I guess, but maybe a minute or two or a question.